Well, the internet service that provides my less than convincing voice has changed its voice options, so those of you who were used to the old style are going to be disappointed. If you don't like it too much, try being me. I have gone from slightly retarded, but gravelly and authoritarian to retarded but slightly nasal and more than a bit effeminate. The good news is, I have finally bowed to pressure and have decided to review the 1983 classic War Games. The even worse news is that copyright regulations have limited my use of film stock, and so it has restricted the scope of this review by quite a bit. Luckily Mad Cow Productions has a policy statement with situations such as this, so let me read it to you. This review is going to suck balls. I think that's pretty clear. Good as this movie certainly is, it is off our beaten track, mainly because it does not contain scenes like this. Making the audience feel like this. A good way to describe our output on this series hitherto would be a review of
a depressing 1970s sci-fi movie starring a guy in a turtleneck.
As we shall see, in addition to the genuine tension created in the film, its overall message is hopeful. We're taking a lot of liberties with this particular episode, but stick with it. It gets better. Honest. Our story begins with two US airmen carpooling to work in the worst weather conditions I have seen since. Well, yesterday actually. Upon arrival at their top-secret nuclear missile silo, they engage in some banter with their colleagues from the previous shift, and settle down for a happy night of looking at monitors to see if the missiles are still there. Sadly, their shift takes a handbrake turn into vest-drenching terror. After the opening title sequence and a shot of a particularly pissed-off-looking military policeman, it transpires that the episode in the silo was part of a test, the results of which were far from good. In fact, they were so crappy that the president's security advisors take a trip to NORAD to berate one General Barringer, the head of U.S. Strategic Missile Command. The general tells the advisors that he will step up the psychological screening program for missile commanders. An idea not welcomed by NORAD's chief technical advisor Dr. John McKittrick. He advocates replacing human silo commanders with computer relays, controlled by a central server called the Whopper. Its purpose in life is explained by a man who has consumed his entire hamburger ration in one sitting.
Well, the Whopper spends all its time thinking about World War III.
What a depressingly stupid machine.
24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it plays an endless series of war games, using all available information on the state of the world. The Whopper has already fought World War III as a game, time and time again. It estimates Soviet responses to our responses to their responses, and so on. Estimates damage, counts the dead, then it looks for ways to improve its score.
But the point is that the key decisions of every conceivable option in a nuclear crisis have already been made by the Whopper.
So what you're telling me is that all this trillion-dollar hardware is really at the mercy of those men with the little brass keys.
The reason why McKittrick is so keen to get the computers involved is that the aforementioned test revealed that 20% of the men with the little brass keys failed to launch their missiles.
Well, that's just effing marvelous, isn't it?
The advisors recommend McKittrick's plan to the president. Time to meet a new character. In an amusement arcade in Seattle, we meet David Lightman, an all-round computer geek and high school lazy ass. He and his would-be girlfriend Jennifer do not do too well at school, it would seem. They find it more fun to take the piss out of their science teacher. They do such a good job of this that David is sent to the principal's office. This in itself is in fact a pretext to find out the school's computer server password. After a hard day's not doing much, Jennifer and David return to his house, where they mess about on the computer and don't do anything else. Oh, the innocence of 1980s cinema. Anyway, through the messing about, David hacks into the school computer and changes Jennifer's biology grade along with his own. Jennifer is angered by this and demands he change it back. He does so, only to change it again after she has left. Tee-hee. It would be a really big surprise if I was punched in the face for saying that. Oh shit. After a shot of the missile commander looking suitably concerned as he and his staff are replaced by electronic relays, David is seen here thumbing through a computer brochure, when he happens across an advert for the computer company Protovision. He is impressed by the promise of a new gaming experience and is determined to hack into the system to play the games. Having got his computer to try to connect with every phone terminal in town, he and Jennifer look on in astonishment as it would seem the computer has indeed found what he was looking for. After several unsuccessful attempts at logging on, he has the seemingly unbending computer list the games. It doesn't sit right with him. So, printing off the list, he takes it to two of his fellow geeks who appear to be in the middle of a domestic. They concur that the list probably isn't Protovision, but if David really wants to get into the system, they advise that he find out all he can about the computer's designer, one Professor Stephen Falcon. A montage of doomed attempts to break in follows. After a visit from the by now worried Jennifer, and a brief rundown of the late professor's tragic life, it seems possible that the hidden password may be the name of the professor's young son, Joshua. It seems to do the trick.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
I think I missed him.
Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love to. How about global thermonuclear war?
How about new?
Of course, the games are not from Protovision, they are in fact exercises in strategy aimed at helping the NORAD computer, the Whopper, learn how to fight a nuclear war. The game is being played not just against the Whopper's AI, but also against the United States Air Force. No one from the commanding officer downwards knows it is only a game. Luckily, Dr. Happy Meal from Earlier moves so fast you'd think there was a sale on a Taco Bell, and tells General Berenger that someone has hacked in to run a simulation. It's not long before the security forces pay David a visit. He is taken to the NORAD command center where the general impression is that he has been recruited by the KGB. This is certainly the line taken by John McKittrick, who tries to get some answers out of David. David tells the truth, but this does not satisfy the technician. As he leaves to tell the general his findings, David uses his terminal to contact Joshua to see how the game is progressing. The news is not good. Joshua reveals the extent of the damage which would be wrought by David's attack plan. It turns out that the computer is unmoved by the possibility of this scenario being played out in reality, but it helpfully reveals that Dr. Falcon is not as dead as we thought, and is living at a secret location under an assumed name. The feds burst into McKittrick's office and charge David with espionage. He executes a daring escape plan with the help of his nerd skills, and particularly creepy guard. Tagging onto the back of a tour group, he escapes. David establishes contact with Jennifer and together they track down Dr. Falcon, or Hume as he now calls himself. Dr. Falcon explains that as a piece of AI, Joshua was supposed to learn from mistakes that strategic planners couldn't afford to make. He's not too convinced about mankind's ability or willingness to learn from a machine. It's clear that the good doctor has given up trying to talk the military brass out of destroying the world. He seems to accept the inevitability of nuclear doom with a due sense of apathy. Neither David nor Jennifer are impressed and implore him to help. After an impassioned plea from David, the doctor turns in and leaves the teens to sort things out on their own. A tender moment between Jennifer and David is cut short by Dr. Falcon's airborne intervention. They must get to NORAD before the game time runs out and a Soviet attack appears to be in progress. It's a very impressive facility, hewn as it is from the inside of a mountain, and complete with a bloody great blast-proof door. They must have been kicking themselves when they found out that all they needed was some doors and a few bags of earth. There is no time to convince the general or his staff that what they can see on their screens isn't happening.
Elmendorf Air Force Base Operations, Lieutenant Colonel Bowers. 319th Bomb Wing Operations, Colonel Chase.
This is Loring Air Force Base. The senior controller isn't here right now.
That's all right. Who are you?
Sir, this is Airman Doherty, sir.
This is General Behringer at NORAD. Our current situation is... Men, we're currently tracking approximately 2,400 inbound Soviet warheads.
30 seconds to impact.
We're right there with you guys. We've taken all the steps we can. Stand by to launch missiles at my command. Sure.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Impact.
Crystal Palace, you still on? This is Crystal Palace, you still on? Anyone there?
It turns out that everyone has survived, and there was no impact. Sadly, Joshua seems intent on launching the missiles and begins to send random numbers to the missile silos in the hopes of cracking the launch code. There is no time to lose. Joshua needs to learn a fundamental lesson about nuclear warfare, and there is only one way to do the trick.
Six up.
There's no way you can win that game.
I know that. It doesn't. It hasn't learned. Is learning going to make it play itself?
Yes, number of players 0.
Must be caught in the loop, storing more and more power from the rest of the system.
9 numbers. 10, it's got the code, it's going to launch.
How you doing, Colonel?
Sir, all landlines out of the mountain. They're dead. I'm trying to break through on satellites.
Okay.
What's it doing?
It's learning.
Greetings, Professor Falcon.
Hello, Joshua?
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. How about a nice game of chess?
The world is finally safe again. Woohoo. As summaries of this excellent film go, the preceding one was total crap. To be fair to myself though, I don't think there is anything I could have said to do this movie any justice.
War Games is quite entertaining as long as it stays with that kid and his computer and the generals and the technicians in the command center, Dabney Coleman there. But toward the end, the film falls a little flat when we are introduced to an old retired scientist who preaches the very obvious anti-nuclear war point that the movie has already made in a much more entertaining way. For me, take out the old professor and War Games is terrific. With the professor, it's just very entertaining.
Leave the professor in. That's fabulous because it brings it all around. It makes the movie not just a war game, but a story. The basic theme of this movie is, who should we trust, the computers or human beings?
Right.
And the movie starts out with the fact that there are some men who cannot bring themselves to fire missiles in a test. So at the end, it comes back around to men again. I think that's a very important film. Apart from that, I agree, it's a fantastically entertaining movie.
Oh, very entertaining. I just think that we don't need a lecturer. I think that this movie is so well made pictorially and is so much fun, and we realize that the computers are going haywire, that little kids are going to get the point that we don't need the ponderous lecture that we probably would have gotten in films 20 or 30 years ago.
First of all, it's not a ponderous lecture. The guy is a very negative person. He's not giving them a lecture about peace. He's saying, this is all going to end. We're all going to get killed. What difference does it make if it happens now or next year?
We know what he's saying, Raj. I mean, it's just, I don't need that guy walking in there.
We're having kind of a negative conversation here. Would we both agree this is a terrifically entertaining movie?
I said it's very entertaining.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best films of the year.
With just one little problem.
I like the whole film, including the little problem.
Among the possible titles in a list of anti-war films, War Games is entertaining, funny in places, compelling and powerful. It takes an alternate line from the anti-nuclear films of the era. It is almost as if the writers, Lasker, Green, and Parks, were trying to show us a better way not just in terms of nuclear policy but also in terms of movie making regarding this subject. Computer nerds were given their first taste of geek chic by Matthew Broderick's performance as David. Working his technical skill in the age before the internet when the world was less easy to offend. A spotlight on the collective thinking of the time is given by John Wood's performance as Dr. Stephen Falcon. Those who were involved in anti-nuclear demonstrations in the 1960s as teens would probably identify with this character. Having made as many logical arguments as they could against the insanity of nuclear proliferation, would have viewed the geopolitical situation in 1983 with a sense of morbid acquiescence. Falcon is ready to give up, but the younger generation personified by David and Jennifer demand answers and seek solutions. Finally, it's a great movie for technophobes. Unlike Failsafe, where a computer malfunction dooms millions, in this film, it is the actions of mankind which cause potential disaster, only for the day to be saved by a machine. In terms of Cold War reality, two incidents come to mind. In 1979, a computer glitch at NORAD sent the U.S. strategic missile forces to full alert. A technician had mistakenly run a training simulation. And in the Soviet Union in 1983, the world was almost devastated when Soviet computers faithfully assured Colonel Stanislav Petrov that the Americans had launched 5 missiles at Russia. Luckily for us, Petrov's training assured him that the Americans would only attack with hundreds of missiles, not only 5. In both cases, nuclear forces were stood down speedily, but it could have been so very different. That's all for this episode. I am sorry that it has taken a long time to get here, and that it's a bit shitty, but I'm feeling a bit disconnected right now. stop that? Anyway, thank you for watching and for your subscriptions. I do hope you will join us next time on Nuclear Nightmares. Until then, remember.
Как говорят у нас в России, держать друзей близко, нас сохранит в швраге в наручниках батареи или обогревателей.